Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Sama Saturday, where we come together every single weekend, every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time to talk about dog wellness. And we have a whole variety of conversations and topics and fantastic guests that we bring to you. And I absolutely love to be able to create a space for this platform of learning. So today is no different. We have some great information here for all of you. And what I love about this information is it's so current. It is groundbreaking. It is all happening now, and it's not out there too far and wide, everything that we'll discuss today. So we really are on the edge of information and getting that to you and to help not only you, humans, for this information being around the food that we eat, but also for our dogs and all the animals in our lives and the food that they eat. So I just want to mention that Dr. Kangas is not yet physically with us on this call because she's having some technical problems that we were trying to work out. That's why we're a few minutes behind schedule, but we will get her on as soon as we can. My name is Amanda Ree, by the way. I'm the founder of Sama Dog, and will just kind of hold space in our conversation today and help facilitate things and really turn it over to our experts. And we are with Larry Bohlen. Hello, Larry. First of all, welcome to our show.
Hi, Amanda. Well, it's great to be a guest and to have a conversation with you.
Oh, awesome. And I just love you and your beautiful wife, Susan, so very much. So let me tell you a little bit about Larry. So he is a former NASA engineer and the co-founder of the Health Research Institute, which is a nonprofit independent laboratory helping to create more transparency in food and agriculture, which includes our dog food as well. Just the organization that he has as a nonprofit being kind of, can I call it crowd-funded almost, or at least in a way, publicly funded, not aligned to a particular large funding organization, can be this outreach, this experience of research and understanding and a deeper knowledge, but also is untied to vested interests, is the point that I'm trying to make here. So the organization that Larry has created with his team is unique in and of itself, not only the information and the research that they're doing, but the organization itself. So we'll take some time today to talk about that and get into what this model is. And I just wanted to mention too that Susan, who is Larry's wife that I mentioned, she has been on our Sama Saturday before. She's an Ayurvedic practitioner and an author, and came on Sama Saturday talking about Ayurveda for dogs in the past. So that's been really great. And I know that she's on live with us today. So hello to Susan as well. These two are such a powerful pair to team together, such deep understanding of spiritual studies as well as their intellectual abilities, and they're able to shine it like nobody else. So we also have with us at some point today, of course, Dr. Katie Kangas, who most of you are probably familiar with. We team up once a month on the first Saturday of every month to bring a different content piece to you through our Sama Saturday. And Dr. Kangas is based here in San Diego in Southern California. She's one of the best holistic veterinarians in the country. She's here in Sorrento Valley. So I always like to share that if you're watching this and you are anywhere in the Southern California area, you can take your animal physically to Dr. Kangas for treatment, which is quite a gift. So while Dr. Kangas is trying to get into our line still, we'll go ahead and kick it off. There's tons of information for us to hear from you anyway, Larry. So why don't we just kind of start it off with, as I mentioned, the organization that you have. Tell us a little bit more about it and the research that you're doing and why.
Absolutely. I loved your introduction, and the lab really is a community resource, like a community bank or a community association. This is a lab that serves the people who are interested in health and wellness and looking at questions that aren't being examined by government or corporations, often because they're not interested or maybe don't even want to know what's in our food, for example. So my partner, who's a biochemist, and I, we were inspired to start a lab that could look at some of the tough questions about what kinds of contaminants, for example, might be in our food and in our bodies. And that's what led us to the point where we're having the conversation today. First, we started asking the question, what's in people? And we looked at the most widely used pesticide as a start. we thought that's probably of great concern. It's in the news. It's probably you've heard of it. It's called Roundup. Its active ingredient is called glyphosate. And so we started looking at that, and a year into it, we partnered with the University of California, San Diego, in your backyard, and we published a paper in the Journal of the American Medical Association on human exposure to that chemical, and it was really startling. It was 38 times higher at current levels than 20 years ago. And I think that after that information came out, we started getting some calls from pet owners, and they said, well, you're testing people. What about my dog? What about my cat? And we hadn't thought of that. It wasn't in our plan of work for the year, but we said, sure, we'd be happy to. And this is what we're about. We want to be public-minded and provide health information. So we started testing dogs and cats and cows and horses. I think we're about to do a monkey even, because people are curious.
Well, it's great that you've been able to utilize those same facilities, basically, and all of your team to explore and expand into the dog world and into the animal world, because as you and I both know, and probably most people listening to this, it's not always the place in which quality lies. It's a rather unregulated or poorly regulated industry. And so for you to be able to reveal to us what's really going on is major, Larry. So thank you for that, and for just thinking of the animals and all the work you're doing. So tell us, you shared a little bit about glyphosate, where it comes from. Mm-hmm. So what does it do to us? Like, why should we care so much about this chemical?
It starts with the connection to cancer, specifically to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You may have heard there were some big lawsuits in California about that, one of which had a $2 billion settlement to the couple who had both contracted the same type of cancer. Lymphoma is widely prevalent in animals too, in dogs at least.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh yeah.
Now we can. There she is. Dr. Kangas is on the line.
They can see me.
Oh.
I would try to dial in as long as they can see you.
Oh, I don't think she can.
Dial in with your phone.
I don't think she can hear me. So I'm going to just pause her. I'll communicate with her, Larry.
Okay, bye.
There we go. I muted her, so you can go ahead, Larry, please.
So the World Health Organization found that it's a probable carcinogen or cancer-causing chemical in people, but they declared it a known carcinogen for animals. And so when you start hearing that kind of scientific conclusion, and just from personal experience that dogs are dying at a younger age, and such a terrible number of instances of cancer taking dogs' lives prematurely, it makes you want to try to find the source and then try to figure out what to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's so important, and that's what we'll get into, is understanding what it is, how it's affecting, and what do we do about it. So when you and I shared some time the other day, Larry, talking about this, you shared some surprising breakthroughs or awarenesses that came through the research. What were those for you?
So first of all, we were really startled that the average level of this herbicide in dogs is 30 to 40 times higher than what we found in humans. So that alone was eye-popping. And so then we started asking the question, what could be that source? The other startling outcome is, after getting about 60 surveys back from dog owners, we all wondered, was it contact? Was it them running across grass, playing in a park, rolling, maybe licking their fur, grooming themselves? But that didn't hold up. The primary source of exposure for dogs is their diet. It's the food they eat, and it's specifically the types of food. And fortunately, we had another nonprofit organization sent us dozens of food samples that we could also test for the herbicide glyphosate. We found dramatically different levels between types of food. So we had raw food with 0 or virtually no glyphosate. Fresh veggies as well, very low. Canned food, about 10 times higher. And then conventional kibble, way up here in the hundreds of parts per billion. High enough that it was almost above the legal limit in California under your Prop 65 regulations.
Mhm. Hmm. And why?
Conventional dog food, a lot of time it receives the dregs or the worst ingredients from the human food industry. That's one reason. But the other one is the ingredients that are used. So, I see Katie giving a thumbs up, but maybe that's for.
Here, let's try to hear Katie. Let's see if it's working. Hold on one second. Okay. Can you hear us, Katie?
I can hear you. I'm so excited.
Oh, good.
Yay! She's back with us.
Sorry to be on the late show, but here I am.
Oh, there's nothing like that technology problem at that moment, right? To give you a little sweaty under the pits.
Exactly. Sorry to interrupt, Larry, but keep on going and I will just catch up.
Sure. So just wanted to summarize the sources. And this third surprise that came out of the research, and that is there's been a move. First of all, grain-based kibble, the kibble with cornmeal or soy filler, that has higher glyphosate levels because those crops are sprayed with a lot of glyphosate, and they have been increasingly sprayed with glyphosate as more of those crops have been genetically modified to be tolerant to it. So you have a built-in mechanism to guarantee high levels. But then the big surprise was a move away from grain, the new grain-free diets that are being advocated by a lot of the big pet food companies. They're substituting pea protein, lentil protein, chickpea flour, different bean-based substitutes for the grains. Well, it turns out that if those beans or legumes, if they're grown conventionally, they have even more glyphosate in them. In fact, those are the highest glyphosate foods we've ever tested anywhere. So you're trying to move to a healthier version, but inadvertently dumping more herbicide into your dog's diet if you're using that conventional kibble.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Kangas, go ahead and share your perspective and your thoughts on this and anything that you think would be valuable for our listeners.
Thank you. And did Larry already define glyphosate for everybody? Did you guys cover that?
Yeah, but I think it's great to hear it again and again because it's pretty new for all of us. Okay,
so clearly it's the herbicide in Monsanto's Roundup, and there's glyphosate in other brands or pesticides as well, right?
That's
Larry?
correct.
Okay, just to clarify, and it is an herbicide and actually also an antibiotic, if Larry didn't share that.
Right.
And it blocks proteins in the plants, from what I understand, and blocks microbes in the soil. So it is not only an herbicide and a toxin, it's also an antibiotic. So it's affecting everyone's microbiome and our bacteria in our gut. And because it's blocking certain proteins in the plants and alkaloids, one of the things that concerns me too is our food is becoming less nutritious for our animals and ourselves, because it's difficult for food to be our medicine anymore when this herbicide is blocking the plants to create some of the very nutrient, nutrition medicine factors that are in what we want to be in our foods. So that's a huge issue. And then glyphosate, from the medical standpoint, one of the big concerns about glyphosate is that it disrupts the tight barrier junctions in the intestine. And as a holistic practitioner, of course, there's an old holistic saying that many people have probably heard that says all disease starts in the gut. And that actually came from Hippocrates, who also coined, let food be thy medicine, let your medicine be thy food. And interestingly, now in modern medicine, conventional medicine, we are recognizing that all disease starts in the gut. And there is a syndrome called leaky gut syndrome, which is basically, we now think is linked to pretty much every chronic disease, because it's where a lot of inflammation in the body starts. And any chronic disease is based on chronic inflammation. And so we really think this is starting at the gut level, where the intestinal barrier breaks down and allows things that were not supposed to get across the gut wall, whether that's toxins, whether that's, food elements and proteins and other things, but it's leaking into the rest of the systemic circulation of the body, and it's wreaking havoc on the immune system. And so this is leading to a lot of inflammation, and glyphosate is a huge culprit in leaky gut syndrome. And then it turns out also that glyphosate and gluten don't play well together in the body. Okay, so when you eat gluten and it's sprayed with glyphosate, or you're eating food sprayed with glyphosate, you have, or your pet has, a toxic synergy with gluten and glyphosate that do even more damage, like exponential damage to the gut than one, does on their own, than either one of them does on their own. And this is interesting because gluten toxicity, or gluten intolerance, allergies to gluten, all this kind of thing. This is a true thing now for dogs and for humans, obviously. And that did not appear to be a big issue for anybody really until the 90s. It started getting recognized. Well, that's when glyphosate, as far as I understand, really took off in the volume that it's being used.
There's the graph.
Yeah.
Okay, Larry, show that graph, and I'm going to just make you the whole screen there.
So this shows from the introduction of glyphosate around 95 or 6, very low levels measured in human beings, and very few people had any detectable levels. But then 20 years later, look at the center, this side of the graph, 38-fold increase, and 80-some% of all people had detectable levels in their bodies.
So that makes perfect sense, with Larry's research and this research that has been done as to why so many animals and people are having tremendous increase in gut problems, sensitivities, and all of these things, because glyphosate is really added to this picture. And so now we know not only is it a toxin, clearly it's been linked to cancer. It's been all over the news that people are being awarded sums of money because this is a known carcinogen now. But it's also, it's tearing down the intelligent barrier of the gut, which is wreaking havoc on everybody's health. And then the other interesting thing is that not only is it disrupting the tight barrier junctions in the gut lining, but it is also, when it's breathed in and it can affect the nasal sinuses, it's also affecting our kidney tubules and our dogs and our pets. And so when the gut lining breaks down, we're letting more foreign things in, toxins in, when glyphosate affects the gut. And so we're letting more things in on the front end, and our dogs' bodies are not able to excrete the toxins as efficiently from the kidneys, because the kidney tubules are being affected by this toxin as well. And so Dr. Zach Bush, who I have written about a bit and had many discussions with, also educates us on the fact that our bodies and our pets' bodies are actually becoming like toxic sponges, largely because of what glyphosate is doing, because we're letting more toxins in through the gut and we're not excreting them properly, and we're hanging on to them more. So it's really creating a very, comprehensive problem.
Interesting choice it was when we as a collective decided to put poison on our food, right? Yeah. That's when things seem to change for everyone. So speaking specifically about the foods then, what are the key foods? And Larry, I think you might even have another chart for this too. What are the key foods that we should know about and watch out for?
One way to try to keep it in mind is to try to eat like a wise owl. And the OWL helps define the list of the highest glyphosate foods. O is for oats, W is for wheat, and L is for legumes. Legumes, peas, chickpeas, black beans, pintos, all your favorite beans. That, by the way, that means if you're a vegan, you really have to look out, because that's the core of your diet, right? The grains and the beans. And sure enough, we found very high levels of glyphosate in people who maintain a vegan diet. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, if you go organic, you can avoid it across the board. But let's say you're eating out, you have a favorite Indian restaurant. Well, if they serve a lentil dish, that's probably the high glyphosate dish. If you buy oatmeal at a conventional restaurant, that's the high glyphosate dish there. Same goes for your dogs. And by the way, we have 3 dogs, and my wife is really attentive to their health, and so we moved to a raw dehydrated diet for one, and also raw meats. But they still tested high. We tested our dog's urine, and each of them had 10 times the level of the average human being. And we thought, what the heck's going on? We're having organic foods for the regular meals. But we looked a little more closely and we saw that the little treats we were giving them to get them to come along during a walk, for instance, they had oats and chickpea flour, and we didn't think about them because they're just little treats. We were thinking about the main meal for the day. And I think that was the source because of the oats and chickpea.
Yeah.
Just
And did you, and, yeah.
So small, just such a small little amount too. It's notable.
Right. Because I think, Larry, did you share with me that when you removed those from your dog's diet and rechecked, did the glyphosate levels go down after removing those treats?
I actually did not retest. I just assumed that by shifting away from them that we had eliminated the source, but that's something I'll do just to confirm it.
Okay.
We'll probably end up testing their fur. That's another direction we're taking because we're finding very high levels bioaccumulate in fur and in our hair. So we'll see about that.
Yeah. So I'm glad, you brought up the treats thing, because I have been educating people too, to, even if they're on a good diet, really look at the source of what's in the treats. And if there is any, grains or grain-free ingredients in the treats, make sure they're organic. But that is, such a good thing to kind of break down for people here, for pet parents, that with the movement for grain-free food, and we know we want to avoid the grains like the corn and the soy and the wheat and stuff, but so many of the grain-free foods is what people are obviously reaching for now, to try under the understanding that this is better for their pets. But grain-free foods still are loaded with different types of carbohydrates. And from my perspective as a nutritionist for animals, I already kind of guide people or educate people on that just because a food is grain-free doesn't mean that it's low carbohydrate. And carbohydrates ultimately break down to sugars. And for a dog and even for people, high levels of sugars is not good because that promotes inflammation. And so I was looking at it, from that standpoint. Now, having more information, and after I met Larry and was able to interview him and present this information recently, now not only am I concerned about, the level of carbohydrates as far as promoting sugars in the body, now we really have an understanding of how many toxins are coming along with these carbohydrate foods, even though they're not grains. And as Larry has pointed out for us, these are even higher than, the corn and the soy. It's the oats and the lentils and these other things that actually have higher levels of glyphosate. So it's really shifting our awareness of what we've been, trying to steer toward, until recently. So really, really good information. And I'm so glad that Larry and his team are doing this kind of work and bringing this to light. And I guess I'll back up because I didn't get to chime in on the introduction and let everybody know that I had written an article for Dogs Naturally. I could actually show, if anybody gets the Dogs Naturally magazine, back in the January edition, it comes out every other month. I actually wrote an article on toxic foods. And interestingly, that's what led me into my research into glyphosates. And wonderfully so, Amanda had planned this topic with Larry Bohlen and had let me know that, we wanted to get together and discuss this. Well, lo and behold, I don't think Amanda even knew that I was already scheduled to give a glyphosates lecture on toxins for Dogs Naturally, or a webinar presentation. And so prior to that presentation a few weeks ago, I was able to connect with Larry on the phone and literally almost for a few hours interview him and ask him all kinds of great questions that gave me powerful information to present to the Dogs Naturally organization. And so this is a really wonderful thing. Thank you, Larry, for us to be educating pet parents and really getting this information out there. And the wonderful thing is we get to apply that to ourselves. This knowledge is going to help us get healthier and to also be able to support our pets to better health too. So I'm really, really thrilled to be able to be involved with this connection. Thank you so much for being here to educate everybody.
Thank you.
Mhm. So let me just pause a moment and welcome everyone. My dog decided to come in right now. He's like, hey, you're inviting people in. Welcome, Graham. But I wanted to pause a moment and welcome everyone to our show today. Some of that have come on with us after our introduction. So who we're talking to today is Dr. Katie Kangas, who is an integrative veterinarian who is with me on Sama Saturday once a month. And then we have also today our special guest, Larry Bohlen, who is the co-founder of the Health Research Institute, a nonprofit independent lab that is studying food. And today we are specifically talking about the chemical glyphosate that is found in and on our foods, and in particular foods especially. And with that, as we and our animals are consuming these foods, the glyphosate, basically the toxicity levels in our body are going very high, showing that that's in the gut, which is having all of these very harmful effects on every aspect of our being. And that's what we've been talking all about. So the keys to remember here, and then I want to definitely take some questions from our audience. And you guys, of course, chime in, but the keys to remember are that these OWL foods, as Larry put it, the OWL, so that's oats, wheat, and legumes / beans. So those foods especially are the particularly high in glyphosate foods. And to avoid consuming those toxins, if we at least with those foods choose organic as much as we possibly can, we will be able to avoid a lot of this exposure. So you guys, let me know if I've got that right, and anything else that you want to kind of add on to a summary. Oh, and charts are always good.
Yeah, so we did an experiment on ourselves at the lab, and this is the result. We wanted to know, does an organic diet really make a difference? And so this is a 20-day diet where my partner ate really high glyphosate foods like Cheerios and Quaker Oats. And then that was before it started. So the very first day after he ate that high glyphosate diet was that big spike over here, 2 parts per billion. And then here's the good news. 3 days later, his levels, when he went all organic, his levels plunged to the non-detect level or just down at trace level. So a 99% drop in only 3 to 4 days. That shows how dramatic a difference you can achieve with organic. But then I want to show you see that spike a little later, like 11 days in? That's when he fell off the wagon. He had a pizza at his favorite Italian restaurant, and the crust, the wheat-based crust, must have had a lot of glyphosate in it. So he spiked for about 2 days until he stayed all organic again. And look at that. He immediately was able to return. What that says to me is you can change your pet's diet, get a really dramatic improvement immediately. And also, let's say you're visiting with a friend or they give you a biscuit at the bank and you're being polite, you give the biscuit to your dog. They might spike for a little bit, but then the body will flush it out as soon as you return to the organic diet.
Yeah, I was there. Thank you so much for sharing that information. And I was extremely happy to get that information recently from Larry, because of course it's great for us to know with the testing that Larry's lab has done that our money spent on organic foods is actually worth doing. I kind of always wondered, but I spend extra for my grocery bill, of course, for my pets' foods, and I recommend that for everybody. So now we really know the value of organic foods is really doing justice. So that's really great to know. The other thing that I wanted to add in too is Larry educated me as well to pass on is that peas are included in that group too, right? And I think they're technically a legume. But so there's a lot of pea protein, pea starch, that kind of thing in grain-free, dog foods as well. So keep in mind that that's also in that list of high glyphosate containing foods. So
you can change it to Powell.
Right. Right. Exactly.
So,
and did Larry also mention before I chimed in here that not only has he showed that chart that humans the average American anyway has a 38-fold increase of glyphosate in our system in the last 20 years, but also that the average American dog has 32 times more than we do. So Not sure if that was mentioned, but that's pretty phenomenal information to have. Very,
30 times, and until last week, a dog had the highest level of glyphosate we ever measured in any animal was a dog at 109 parts per billion. Last week we tested a racehorse at 120.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's probably because of the high oat diet that they have, and also molasses can have a lot of glyphosate in it. So that's something to keep in mind. I did want to share one other thing that puts things in perspective a little bit. And this is for all the humans listening, not just for our dogs, but one bowl of oatmeal has about the same amount of glyphosate as 100 glasses of red wine. So that's such a dramatic difference. It keeps me eating organic oatmeal if I eat it, but I don't worry if I'm out to dinner and I have a glass of conventional red wine. It just can't compare to those high glyphosate foods.
Right. That's really good news for us wine lovers. And, and interestingly, actually, I would love to add a little side note on here is that most people are probably aware of, as a matter of fact, the grape toxicity issue for dogs, that grapes are toxic for dogs. And interestingly, when I graduated from veterinary school in 1993, that was not an issue. Nobody had ever heard of grape toxicity for dogs, did not exist. And when it became known about, I don't know, 10 years later, a decade or so after I was out of school, I'm like, where did that come from? How did I not, did I miss that class that day in school? Like how all of a sudden did I not know that grapes were toxic? Well, it turns out they weren't. I mean, this was not a known thing. And there are now been experts, toxicologists that have been studying this, veterinary toxicologists that are finding that, and this makes perfect sense with what I had intuitively thought, is that it doesn't appear that it's actually the grape that's toxic. It's the toxins that are sprayed on the grapes. Okay. And when you travel to other countries and you go to Europe, where there's a lot of countries that grow a lot of wine, in France and Italy and Spain, and they're like, our dogs eat grapes off the vines all the time. They're fine, And so and they've linked these toxins very specifically to California grapes, by the way, but California produces the most grapes and raisins that our country consumes. So very interestingly, Larry's mentioning that, wine, the grapes that produce wine do have toxins, but imagine that your oatmeal has even so much more than that. But it's just an interesting perspective to know that all of these toxins that we are using in our world and that we're, expanding on more and more and more exponentially as the years go by are dramatically affecting our pets to the point where, dogs are getting kidney failure from eating a grape. So really an interesting kind of tangent to just give people some perspective on this too.
Yeah, like you said, Dr. Katie, is food as medicine or not in many cases. Food as the delivery mechanism of the toxins that are making us all ill. So I have a question, and then I want to take some from the audience too, I guess it's a question, but is it good to recommend to people or for our listeners that have an animal, a dog specifically, that has had digestive upset, imbalance, flare-ups for quite some time now? I know plenty of dogs that fall into this category. Do you think that those people who are dealing with that, a good next step would be to take the steps to remove as much glyphosate as possible from their diet by choosing the organic or the raw meats, and see if just that change can make a big difference to their dogs, including being careful with the treats? Just try to remove all the glyphosate and see how their dog does after that?
Absolutely. And from the medical and nutrition therapy standpoint, I would take other measures to try and help the gut repair and things like that. But absolutely what you said, Amanda, simply removing the glyphosates to the best of our ability can go a long way to stop the destruction that's occurring in the gut. There's other things we can do to even, complement and support healing more, but that is a instrumentally positive move. Absolutely. And kudos to Larry for researching this information so we have enough understanding to know that these are steps that we should be taking, and we can do them for ourselves now too. So it's monumental. Thank you.
So let me tune into our audience here. So again, for anyone that's just jumping on, we're talking about glyphosate today and that toxin being in our food and how we can avoid it for ourselves and our animals. So I want to turn over to a couple questions here. Here's Lola says, I was told that even organic owl foods are contaminated as well. Do you know of that?
They can be. We occasionally we see a high level in an organic oat sample, for example. Sorry to repeat it there, but 95% of the samples we test are low or no glyphosate. So statistically, maybe 1 out of 20 times you have a spike, but remember what happens. Your body cleans it out. It's that chronic exposure that I'm concerned about for both people and animals. So I know that on average, I'll have a much lower level by going organic. But that's a very good question, because there are cases of fraud and there are cases of accidental mixture that happen from the farm transport all the way to the individual.
But just to clarify, Larry, 95% of the organic foods that you have tested are clean. So 5% of the time we may get some exposure with an organic food.
That's, 95% is an A in any class. Look at that.
Yeah,
that way.
that's pretty good. Right.
Doing really well by buying organic, and most of the players in the industry are ethical and taking lots of steps to ensure that they live up to the promise of organic.
Mm-hmm. And I actually would love to ask a question also for Larry to clarify for us. Is we talked about several of the foods, peas and the lentils and things, but rice was not covered, and rice is such a common ingredient in dog foods. Can you tell us, Larry, is that a food that has glyphosate in it typically or not?
Right, glyphosate is not used in rice production. Now, other pesticides are,
right,
but we know less about that because our focus in recent times has been on that.
Okay, so
I
definitely.
would say though that when you're minimizing glyphosate on those other crops, it's like a canary in the coal mine. You would be minimizing your exposure to any other pesticide used on those crops by avoiding glyphosate as well.
Mm-hmm.
We have someone asking, do we have a list of companies that are best?
For food companies?
I guess food companies is what she's asking. Maybe
organic
dog food companies. I think, Larry, you had something that had specific brands that just 20 or so, I think, that you tested. Is that right?
Right. I could share that with you. If you want to put on your Facebook page. I don't have it printed out at the moment, but it was testing performed by an organization called Institute for Responsible Technology. And it might also be available on the website. They commissioned about 20 tests we ran for them, and then they had a summary of about 10 test results from testing performed about 2 years ago by another lab.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, if you can send that over, I can add it. I'll add the slides that Larry showed already, the images. I'll add that to the bottom where our comments are afterwards of this broadcast.
And I would just add, when you're reading pet food labels, to really look now for organic ingredients. And if Larry didn't clarify already, what I learned from him recently is that, it's obviously good if we can afford to buy grass-fed, organically raised, animal product meats, and look for that in the pet foods. But even if they're not organically non-GMO fed animals, the meat, when your pet is eating meat, has very, very low glyphosate content in it compared to the, plant matter. And so when you're reading a food label, at least the plant matter for sure, try to make sure that that is organic. And there are so many pet foods that have good ingredients in their list, you would think, but if it's not organic, it's got a lot of hidden stuff that we didn't realize in there. So definitely look for pet foods that use organic. So.
Mm-hmm. So good to know. I mean, Dr. Katie, I'm currently looking at my own biscuits, and just making sure that those organic oats are from the right source and they're not in that 5%, and, just really taking those steps, because obviously I want the best product on the market, not to mention I feed it to all my dogs constantly. Right. So we want to make sure that we're bringing the right things in this house. So then that leads me actually, Larry, to want to share about testing your own dogs. I saw on your site that we can do that. You can send in a sample sample, a urine sample, and get that done. Will you tell us a little more about that?
Mm-hmm. Now we put together a simple kit so that people could collect a sample, mail it back to the lab, and it wouldn't be too much of a challenge. I actually have an example here. It's just a little box that we mail out to people. It has a urine cup like you would get at your doctor's office, and postage on the back, so you just throw it in a mailbox. And we made sure that it's compliant with U.S. postal regulations and Canadian for that matter. And that helps to build the database of results so that I can relay the kind of information that I did to the listeners today. So you get your own pet's test level or results back from the test, but you're contributing to a study of animal exposure.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And that's what I love and we love about this kind of crowdsourcing and the unification of and the way in which you fund these projects. It's so community oriented and to be trusted because of that.
And at the crowdfunded portion, it's important to mention, so we don't go to a corporation or a government source to finance the study. It's each individual paying for the test for their own animal or for themselves. That collectively allows us to gather all that data, but not have to rely on that one source. We rely on hundreds of people to contribute, and it's collectively we're doing the study.
That is fantastic. So, so when we order a test kit for our pets or ourselves, so we can test send our own urine in, right, and get ourselves tested, which I would love to do. So I'm going to do that. And obviously for my dog as well. And then we can make a donation separately from that as well. You take donations to help fund your research.
Oh, I did not plant that question, I promise.
No, I would love more people to be able to have the opportunity to support this kind of research because it's really so valuable for us. I mean, from my standpoint as a health practitioner trying to promote better animal and human health, and a lot of what I do is through food and food medicine. And so this just is monumental information for me to be able to share with people. And I have so much gratitude for that. And I would love to, expose the opportunity for people to support this kind of thing as well.
Well, it was with your encouragement that we actually added the donate tab on our website. We hadn't been thinking about it so overtly, but we are a 501c3 nonprofit. People's donations are tax deductible. And the donations allow us to expand beyond the current research to add new projects. So people's donations for now, at the moment, for instance, would enable us to expand in the nutrition quality testing. That's our new objective. We want to test 100 different types of dog food and compare the nutrition levels as well as the pesticide levels.
Yeah, that would be such valuable information for pet parents, truly.
So I will definitely be adding to this feed. Once we finish up, I'll post below not only the images and some of the graphs that I mentioned, but also the donate opportunity, the link to take you right in to support the lab, as well as the testing link if anyone would like to get themselves or their dogs tested. Lola had just asked, is there a test that our doctors can do for us? Or is this more of an independent thing?
So some doctors provide the glyphosate test option to their patients. They do work with us. We have relationship with practices here in the US as well as in Canada.
Yes, Dr. Sheila Patel was over at our house the other day, who is the medical director of the Chopra Center, and I was telling her about our upcoming Facebook Live, and she said she spoke with your partner and has recommended many people to get their testing done via the Chopra Center over to your lab. So the word is getting out.
Yay, that's fabulous. Good.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much. I think we've covered some great ground here. I think we've answered most of the questions. Oh, Susan asked this one here real quick. Does CBD oil or CBD treats contain glyphosate?
We'll know soon. This week, the lab received its first hemp oil extracts. So don't know until we test.
Wow. Okay, well, we'll
that's
wait for
good
that.
information to have. Yeah. Now we got to
Yeah,
start
really.
looking. Now we have to start looking for organically grown hemp too.
What is this world coming to?
I know. Oh my gosh.
All the more reason to have our own gardens and eat out of them.
Exactly. Exactly. That's what I'm promoting too, is people growing more of their own food and getting involved in, community awareness and getting back to the roots of having some of our own contribution into what we're eating, rather than leaving it all up to the mass farming industry that has really taken us in a little bit of a scary direction. So empowering people to start getting back into growing your own food and having a garden and doing what you can to have a little more control over what you're eating, what your pets are eating too.
Indeed. Well, I think that's a great place to leave it. Any final words from you, Larry?
Just a big thank you, Amanda, because the communication service that you provide your listeners is exactly what's needed to get the critical scientific information out there. We don't do that part, and you do, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for being willing, and to your beautiful wife, Susan, for making the suggestion to connect us all, to Dr. Kangas for totally getting it and like sending over skyrocketing, fireworks when she heard that we were going to have you on. It was like, heck yeah. So, it's just the alignment of all of us that want to truly, authentically do better by the animals and the humans on the planet. And we are aligned in our efforts and in our purpose in this world. And in every little slice of the pie that we have, we can go into that place and share it. And I'm very, very grateful and honored to be able to do that with both of you here in Sama Dog. So thank you.
Thank you. Ditto.
All right, everyone. Well, we will see you all next weekend. We'll be doing some meditation together, get back to the quiet yet again, and then we'll bring more information and we'll keep doing this dance together. We love all of you being part of our community. Let us know if you have any other questions. We'll keep our eyes on this and answer them as best we can. Lots of love, and we'll see you next time. Namaste, everyone.
Namaste. Thank you.